Snow falls on the Irish coast. Wind cuts through timber walls. Inside a wattle and daub hut, frost creeps across the floor. The fire dies. Morning finds the family huddled under every scrap of wool they own, breath visible in the air. This was winter for most of medieval Europe, a season that killed livestock, froze grain stores, and turned survival into a daily struggle against the cold that no surface structure could keep out. But beneath their feet, another world existed. A world of stone galleries and earthen chambers where temperature held steady, where grain stayed dry for years, where entire families could vanish when raiders came over the hill. The medieval peasant didn't just endure winter, they engineered their way beneath it. Over 3,000 of these underground structures have been found in Ireland alone. They appear across Scotland, Cornwall, Germany, Austria, and Russia, each region with its own name and design, but all solving the same fundamental problem: how to survive when the surface world becomes unlivable. The Irish called them souterrains. The Germans carved Erdstelle. Slavic communities built zemlyankas. These weren't crude holes scraped in desperation. They were calculated multi-generational construction projects that required 200 person days of labor, the movement of 200 cubic meters of earth, and an empirical understanding of physics that wouldn't be formally codified for another 5 centuries. The question isn't whether medieval peasants were clever. The question is how they turned dirt into technology. To understand this, we must start from where the problem began: the materials. Medieval rural homes were built from the materials the land provided: timber frames, wattle walls woven from hazel branches, daub made of mud and straw, and roofs thatched with reeds or heather. These materials were renewable, easy to work with, and catastrophically bad at holding heat. Thatch has excellent insulation value when dry, but its low density means it can't store thermal energy. The moment the fire goes out, warmth bleeds through the roof into the winter night. Timber walls, even when plastered with clay, create a porous barrier that allows wind to penetrate. Surface temperatures inside these homes tracked closely with the air outside. When January brought temperatures down to -1 degree Celsius, the interior barely stayed above freezing. Winter turned every night into a gamble, and for many families, the odds were fatal, so they went down. The Earth, at a depth of 3 to 4 meters, doesn't experience surface weather. It sits at the average annual temperature of the region, roughly 8 to 10 degrees Celsius in Ireland, slightly lower in Central Europe. This is the principle of thermal mass. Dense materials, such as packed clay, glacial till, limestone, and sandstone, have high thermal inertia. They absorb heat slowly during summer and release it slowly during winter. The lag time between surface temperature and deep soil temperature can be months. Winter cold doesn't penetrate. Summer heat doesn't escape. The earth becomes a battery, storing energy and smoothing out the violent swings that cause harm. Medieval builders discovered this empirically. They dug test pits, felt the temperature difference with their hands, and realized that depth meant stability. Archaeological measurements confirm their intuition. Inside a stone-lined souterrain in Central Europe, the January interior temperature holds at 4.8 degrees Celsius, while the exterior plunges to -1.4. That 6-degree differential is the difference between metabolic crisis and a manageable cold. Even without any active heating source, the minimum monthly mean temperature inside remains 3.5 degrees warmer than outside. For a malnourished body wrapped in wool, that margin is survival. But digging down created new problems. The first was structural. Soil is heavy. A cubic meter of clay-rich glacial till weighs up to 2,000 kilograms. Carve a void underground, and the weight above wants to collapse inward. Medieval builders needed the earth to support itself. In regions where the subsoil was too soft, such as loose sand, wet peat, or crumbling loam, they employed the cut and cover method. They excavated a massive trench, 2 to 4 meters deep and sometimes 20 meters long. Spoil was piled beside the cut. Then they built dry stone walls inside the trench, stacking limestone or shale without mortar. The trick was corbelling. Each course of stone was laid slightly inward compared to the one below. As the walls rose, they curved inward, creating a self-supporting arch or beehive dome. Gravity held the stones in compression. Once the walls met at the top or were capped with massive lintels, the entire trench was backfilled. The original turf was laid back over the top. From the surface, nothing remained visible except a faint depression that could be mistaken for an animal burrow. Where bedrock or hard-packed boulder clay allowed, direct tunneling was faster. Builders sank vertical test shafts to assess the till. If the soil held its shape, they tunneled horizontally, carving galleries that branched and turned. Spoil came out in leather bags hauled up the shafts. These shafts were either backfilled or converted into ventilation once construction finished. In Ireland, excavations have uncovered souterrains with tunnels 70 meters long, connecting multiple chambers through passages so narrow an adult had to crawl. Where stone wasn't available, timber became the primary structural material. Excavations at Liscray revealed a souterrain lined entirely in black bog oak, logs 5 feet thick forming the passage walls, every surface boarded over. The joinery used mortise and tenon connections, the same technique applied in bridge building and mill construction. These joints created rigid frames capable of resisting lateral soil pressure. The timber itself, preserved by bog chemistry, lasted centuries. This labor was staggering. One souterrain complex required the removal of 170 to 200 cubic meters of soil. Picks broke the earth, shovels lifted it, and bags carried it. No pulleys, no carts inside the tunnels. Every cubic meter represented hours of human effort in cramped, dark spaces. 20 to 50 tons of stone had to be quarried, shaped, and moved, sometimes from prehistoric monuments repurposed as quarries. 10 to 20 oak logs needed to be felled, transported, and precisely shaped. The caloric cost has been estimated at over 1 million kilocalories. But why invest that much? Because the alternative was death, theft, or starvation. The souterrain solved 3 problems simultaneously: climate, storage, and defense. The storage problem was chemical. Grain is alive. Wheat, barley, and oats harvested in late summer contain residual moisture and dormant enzymes. Stored above ground in a timber granary, they're exposed to temperature swings and humidity that trigger germination or mold. Fungi thrive in damp conditions, producing toxins that make the grain poisonous. Pests like granary weevils, flower beetles, and grain moths infest the stores and consume more than humans can afford to lose. A bad storage season could mean famine by March. Underground pits offered an elegant solution through hermetic sealing. The pit was filled to the top with grain, then sealed with a thick cap of clay, stone, and animal dung. The seal had to be airtight. Once closed, the grain and any microorganisms inside began consuming the trapped oxygen through respiration. Carbon dioxide replaced it. When the CO2 concentration reached a lethal threshold, aerobic life stopped. Weevils suffocated. Mold spores couldn't germinate. Bacteria died. The grain entered dormancy, its own biological activity creating a self-sterilizing environment. Roman agricultural writers like Varro and Pliny the Elder described wheat stored in such underground cirri remaining viable for 50 years. Medieval peasants didn't need Latin texts. They had an observation: a sealed pit worked, an unsealed pit didn't. Break the seal to retrieve grain, reseal immediately, and the process restarts. Archaeological finds of these storage pits reveal stratified layers of grain, separated by clay caps, indicating multiple cycles of filling and extraction over several years. The same principle applied to dairy. Butter, cheese, and milk spoil rapidly at warm temperatures, but stay fresh in cool, stable environments. In Cornwall, the design of the fogu, a local term for souterrain, correlates with dairy storage. Massive dry stone construction, large lintels, chambers positioned for maximum thermal mass. Butter stored here could last through winter without going rancid. Cheese aged slowly, developing flavor rather than rot. Evidence for active food processing comes from pottery. Souterrain ware, characterized by coarse, unglazed, tub-shaped vessels, sometimes decorated with rosettes or herringbone patterns, consistently appears in excavations. These weren't fine tableware. They served as functional containers for fermentation, storage, and transportation. Rotary quern stones, used for grinding grain into flour, are found alongside the pottery. The souterrain wasn't just a pantry, it was a workshop, but food preservation was useless if raiders took everything. The medieval countryside was violent. Viking incursions along the coasts, clan-based cattle raids in the highlands, feudal armies requisitioning supplies, local bandits. The peasants' wealth was visible and portable, consisting of grain, livestock, butter, and tools. Homes were indefensible. Timber palisades could be burned. Stone walls were rare and expensive. The only strategy that worked was invisibility. Souterrain entrances were camouflaged. In Ireland, they were integrated into ring forts, circular earthwork enclosures topped with timber palisades. The entrance might be hidden inside the bank, beneath the floor of a house, or disguised as a drainage ditch. From outside the ring fort, nothing suggested an underground refuge existed. Even inside, the entrance was often a low hole covered by a stone slab or wooden hatch that could be hidden under straw or household debris. Once inside, the architecture became hostile. Passages were deliberately narrow, 60 centimeters wide in some cases, barely enough for an adult to squeeze through sideways. An attacker entering had to abandon shields, couldn't swing a sword, and moved slowly in complete darkness. Defenders knew every turn, every obstruction. They could position themselves at choke points and wait. The most lethal features were the creepways. These were passages so low that anyone moving through had to crawl on their belly or hands and knees. A raider in this position is defenseless, hands occupied with forward motion, unable to see ahead, unable to retreat quickly. The defender, waiting on the far side, could use a simple spear or even a rock to deadly effect. Germanic Erdstelle often feature schlupf passages, tight holes requiring a full-body contortion to squeeze through. One at a time, slowly, blind. If an attacker made it past the creepways, they encountered drop holes. A gallery would end in a vertical shaft, dropping 2 to 3 meters to a lower level. Descent required going head first or feet first through a narrow opening, exposing the attacker to anyone waiting below. Some souterrains had multiple levels connected by these drop holes, creating a vertical maze. The final chamber, the deepest point, often had sockets for timber beams, indicating the presence of doors or barricades. If a family was cornered there, they could bar the entrance and wait out the raid in a space the attacker couldn't easily breach. The souterrain inverted the power dynamic. The raider had superior numbers, weaponry, and the advantage of daylight. But underground, those advantages evaporated. Darkness was total. No windows, no ambient light. Oil lamps and candles provided the only illumination, and carrying a light made you a target. Spatial knowledge became the decisive factor. The family who lived there could navigate by touch, knowing where every turn led and where every defensive position waited. The raider stumbled forward into a controlled kill zone. But defense required breathable air. Seal yourself in an airtight chamber, and you suffocate within hours. Carbon dioxide accumulates. Oxygen depletes. The body can't expel CO2 from the bloodstream, and even with oxygen present, high CO2 causes hypercapnia, headache, confusion, unconsciousness, and death. Medieval builders couldn't afford to create a tomb. They engineered ventilation using gravity and temperature. When air inside the chamber warms from body heat, oil lamps, or a small fire, this creates a pressure differential. If there's a vertical shaft open to the surface, the warm air flows upward and out. As it exits, it pulls fresh air in through the entrance. The system is self-regulating. The greater the temperature difference, the stronger the draft. Archaeological evidence confirms this wasn't accidental. Excavations at souterrains in Ireland have uncovered purpose-built air shafts up to 2.7 meters long, positioned in corbelled chambers where people congregated. These shafts were too narrow for an adult to climb, defensively sound, but wide enough to allow continuous airflow. Some were lined with stone to prevent collapse. Others were simple tunnels bored upward through packed earth, stabilized by roots or reinforced with wattle. The result was a survivable atmosphere even during extended occupation. Families could shelter for days. During a raid, breathing recycled but oxygenated air, while the surface world was searched and looted. The warm, stale air rose through the vent. Cool, fresh air entered through the concealed entrance. The cycle continued as long as the temperature differential existed, but water was the silent enemy. Digging below the water table creates a sump. Groundwater infiltrates. Walls saturate and collapse. Chambers flood. Everything stored inside, including grain, tools, and textiles, was ruined. Medieval builders couldn't waterproof with modern membranes, so they employed geometry and drainage techniques. Most souterrains were built on sloped ground. The entrance was at the highest point. Galleries descended gradually toward a low point. Water, obeying gravity, flowed downhill along the passage floors. Floors were often paved with flat stones, creating a smooth channel. At the lowest chamber, a sump or drop hole collected the water. From there, it either seeped into permeable subsoil or was channeled out through a concealed drain that exited downslope. Some sites exhibit evidence of iron panning, with hard, rust-colored mineral deposits forming along drainage channels. This indicates long-term water flow, proof that the system worked continuously over decades. At one excavation in Northern Ireland, the tunnel sloped gently toward a chamber with iron-panned edges, demonstrating that the builders had successfully managed drainage in soft sand subsoil, material that should have collapsed, but was stabilized by continuous, controlled water removal. The sophistication appears in the details. Stone-flagged floors weren't decorative. They prevented erosion. Drains weren't afterthoughts. They were integral to the design, planned before the first shovel broke ground. The builders understood hydrology intuitively, where water accumulates, how it moves, where it must go. Which raises the question, how did they see? Torches were commonly used for temporary work, consisting of bundles of pine shavings or pitch-soaked rags tied to sticks. But they were smoky, consumed oxygen rapidly, and burned out quickly. Unusable for long-term occupation or extended labor underground. Candles, made from tallow or beeswax, were expensive and still smoky. The solution was the oil lamp. Medieval oil lamps were simple clay or stone bowls filled with animal fat, typically from cows, pigs, or horses. A twisted fiber wick floated in the fat, one end submerged, the other extending over the rim. Light the wick, and it burned for hours on a single fill, producing a small, steady flame. The advantage over candles was burn time and economy. A single lamp could illuminate a workspace for an entire day's labor. Archaeological finds include stone niches carved into souterrain walls at regular intervals as lighting alcoves. These were positioned at head height in work areas or at transitions between galleries. A lamp placed in an alcove provided hands-free illumination and reflected light off the stone, amplifying the effect. Some alcoves were lined with light-colored stone or plastered with lime to increase reflectivity. The builders weren't just carving holes, they were designing optical systems to maximize scarce light. The psychological impact of working underground cannot be dismissed. Darkness, confinement, and the weight of the earth overhead are conditions that induce claustrophobia and fear. Yet, medieval communities spent a significant amount of time in these spaces. Children helped haul spoil during construction. Families sheltered during raids. Workers processed grain by lamplight. The souterrain had to be psychologically tolerable. Cultural adaptation may have played a role in this. In Ireland, souterrains are sometimes associated with ecclesiastical sites. Place names like Sil Clug, Bell Cell, and Sil Paidir, prayer cell, suggest that some functioned as hermitages for monks seeking ascetic isolation. The desert fathers of Egypt and Syria retreated to caves and tombs to pray in solitude. Irish monks translated that practice to underground chambers, carving out spaces for meditation beneath the earth. If the spiritual elite could sanctify these dark places, the peasantry could rationalize their own use. The reuse of sacred stones reinforces this. Excavations frequently find Ogham-inscribed stones, pre-Christian Irish writing, and Christian cross slabs built into souterrain walls. One explanation is structural pragmatism. Old monuments provided pre-cut stone, but the consistent inclusion of inscribed stones suggests intentional symbolism. The peasant entering the souterrain passed by sacred writing, a protective threshold. Whether this warded off evil, blessed the occupants, or simply provided psychological comfort, the effect was real. The underground became a sanctified space, not merely a hole. What remains certain is communal investment. Building a souterrain required coordination beyond the household. The labor estimates, totaling 200 person days and over 1 million kilocalories, exceed what a single family could provide. This was a village project, organized through the manorial system or rural communes. The medieval open field system already fostered cooperation. Peasants pooled oxen to plow common fields, shared harvest labor, and managed collectively grazed meadows. Constructing a communal refuge extended that logic. Every family contributed labor. Every family benefited from the result. Evidence suggests artisan involvement. The quality of stonework in some souterrains, precisely corbelled arches, fitted lintels, and dressed blocks, indicates trained masons. Timber joinery in the bog oak-lined passages required carpentry skills equivalent to those used in mill construction. These weren't amateurs. The community either employed traveling craftsmen or developed internal expertise over generations. The presence of reused megalithic stones, blocks weighing tons, carved millennia earlier, demonstrates that peasant builders had the engineering knowledge to move massive materials using levers, rollers, and communal muscle. The chronology matters. Many souterrains show evidence of multi-phase construction. An initial gallery is extended, chambers are added, passages are reinforced. This wasn't a single-generation build. It was an inherited architecture. A grandfather dug the first tunnel. His sons extended it. His grandsons added ventilation shafts. Each generation inherited not just the structure, but the knowledge of how to maintain it, when to use it, and how to expand it when the family grew. Abandonment, when it came, was often deliberate. Excavations find souterrains backfilled in a single event with pottery fragments, tools, and debris layered uniformly, suggesting that the community chose to close the structure. One possibility is social change. By the 12th century, the Norman conquest had brought centralized authority and the construction of stone castles. The need for hidden refugees declined. Another possibility is religious pressure. The Catholic Church discouraged practices associated with pagan or folk traditions. If souterrains carried spiritual significance, their use may have been suppressed, or the structures simply became obsolete. Improved agriculture led to larger surpluses that couldn't be stored in underground pits. Surface granaries with better ventilation replaced hermetic storage. Timber homes improved with chimneys and glazed windows, making surface winter survival more feasible. The souterrain, once vital, became a relic, yet the principles endure. Modern earth-sheltered homes use the same thermal mass strategy. Passive annual heat storage systems bury insulation below the frost line, creating a stable temperature reservoir. The souterrain was the medieval prototype, proof that humans understood these concepts through experience long before thermodynamics became a formal science.